My husband's funeral was terrible, and my son's greedy wife, Victoria, made a real fuss, mocking, "These are just crocodile tears, he has nothing to cry about." The reading of the will shut her up quick, though. It's good to have you listening, so I can figure out how far this tale of mine has spread. The church was overflowing with flowers, lilies and roses, Sarah's favorites, their sweet smell filling the air. But all I could catch was the sharp sting of my grief. My hands shook as I sat in the front pew, eyes locked on my wife's casket. 48 years of marriage, poof, gone in a heartbeat. "You holding up, Dad?" My daughter, Emily, grabbed my hand, her eyes puffy from all the tears. I just nodded, words stuck in my throat. What could I even say? Sarah was gone, and no amount of talking would fill that gaping hole. Sarah, my anchor for nearly half a century. Folks had been pouring in all morning, old buddies, co-workers, neighbors, all in black, their faces heavy as they mumbled their sympathies. Some were strangers to me, people from way back that Sarah kept up with while I sort of faded into the shadows, like husbands tend to do. I caught sight of my son, Thomas, slipping in through a side door, Victoria right on his heels. My chest tightened just looking at them. Thomas is the spitting image of me, tall, same square jaw, same warm eyes. But today, those eyes were icy, far away. Victoria steered him along, her fancy black dress and pearls looking more like she was headed to a boardroom than a funeral. They didn't once come to see Sarah in the hospital, not in those last weeks. Always too tied up, always some excuse. "I ought to go say hi to Thomas," I muttered to Emily. "Dad, hold off. Not the time." Emily's voice was sharp. She and Thomas hadn't talked in months, not since they butted heads over Sarah's treatment. Victoria pushed for hospice, saying it was the only way, while Emily begged to try some newfangled therapy. They dug in, and I was stuck in the middle, watching my wife fade as my kids tore into each other. The service kicked off. The pastor went on about Sarah's life, her achievements, how much she loved us. I barely caught a word. My head was swimming with memories, our wedding, the kids being born, quiet nights on the porch watching the sun dip low, still holding hands after all those years. Then it was time for family to talk. Emily went up first, her voice cracking as she told stories about her mom teaching her to bake, helping with school projects, walking her down the aisle. Thomas passed on speaking. He just sat there, stiff, next to Victoria, who kept murmuring in his ear. Then it was my turn. My legs felt like concrete as I shuffled to the podium. I looked out at all those faces, some I knew, plenty I didn't. Sarah was, I started, my voice breaking. Sarah was my whole world. My wife, my best pal, my partner in everything. Tears rolled down my face, and I let them come. 48 years of love earned those tears. We had our rough patches, like anybody, I went on. But we always tackled them side by side. That's what marriage is, facing the highs and lows together. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Victoria lean over, whispering to the lady next to her with a smirk. I tried to stay focused, to honor Sarah, but my words stumbled. "I'm gonna miss her every single day," I choked out before the tears took over. As I headed back to my seat, I heard it, Victoria's voice, not quiet enough, loud enough for folks nearby to catch. "Crocodile tears, huh? He's got no business crying." Everyone knows they were basically done. Her words hit like a punch to the gut. I stopped dead, couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Gasps spread through the crowd. Emily half jumped up, looking ready to explode. "How dare she?" someone hissed. But Thomas? That's what hurt most. He didn't stand up for me. Didn't call her out. He just stared off, cheeks red, not from shame for Victoria, but for me. I stumbled back to my seat, numb all over. 48 years of marriage, dragged through the mud at my wife's funeral. And my own son, sitting there quiet while his wife ripped my heart apart. The rest of the service was a blur. Didn't hear the closing prayers or the talk about the reception. Just felt the stares, the whispers, the judgment. As we left the church, Victoria strutted ahead with Thomas, chin up like she owned the place. She glanced back at me once, her eyes gleaming with victory. But there was one more thing coming, something Thomas and Victoria didn't see coming. Sarah's will was getting read right after the service, per her wishes. Despite the shame burning in me, I felt a spark of something else watching Victoria march on. Sarah was always a planner, and she saw right through Victoria long before I did. The first time we met her, warning bells went off. She was too smooth, too polished. Her laugh felt rehearsed, her questions about our family too pushy. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table that night, our little signal after decades together. She felt it too. "She's just trying to win us over," Thomas said later when I gently brought it up. He was 36, starting to panic about being alone forever. Victoria was stunning, smart, and seemed head over heels for him. Who was I to block my son's shot at happiness? Their wedding was over the top, way fancier than Thomas ever cared for, but Victoria wanted it, and somehow my practical son burned through his savings for it. Sarah and I chipped in what we could, but Victoria made it clear our contribution was peanuts. "Your folks don't get how important it is to look the part, do they?" I overheard her tell Thomas at the reception. "It's kinda cute, in a dated way." At first, Thomas just started to drift. Fewer calls. Family dinners went from monthly to barely yearly. When they did show, Victoria always had an excuse to leave early. "Thomas is wiped out from work," she'd say, though his eyes said he wanted to stick around. Then came the no-shows, missed birthdays, ditched holidays, forgotten anniversaries, always with big apologies and promises to do better. Better never came. When Emily had her first kid, Thomas and Victoria rolled in 2 days late. "We had a charity gala," Victoria said, barely glancing at her new niece. You know how crucial these events are for Thomas's career. Those galas, business dinners, networking gigs, they always seem to land on family time. Victoria kept Thomas's schedule packed, leaving no room for us. It started with these little jabs, like venom Victoria slipped into Thomas's ear when she thought I wasn't listening. "Your folks are so stuck in their old ways," she'd say, loud enough for me to catch. "They're sweet, but they just don't get how things work these days." Or she'd toss out, "It's cute how your dad thinks he's still gotta look out for you. Some parents can't let go, huh?" The worst was when she'd sigh, "They always make me feel like I'll never measure up to their perfect son, like nobody ever could." At first, Thomas would mumble a weak defense for us, but that fizzled out. It was simpler to nod along, to keep things calm with her. The real gut punch came when Sarah got her cancer diagnosis back in 2022. The doctors were hopeful since they caught it early, but the treatment was going to be rough and cost a fortune. "We need to talk about what care makes sense," Victoria said at a tense family sit-down. "These treatments will eat up all your retirement money. And for what, a couple extra years?" Even Thomas looked floored by how cold she sounded. But Victoria, quick as a whip, teared up and backpedaled. "I'm just so worried about you both," she said, grabbing my hand with her polished nails. "I only want what's best, and sometimes that means tough calls." Somehow, she spun her heartlessness into fake concern. And Thomas, clinging to the idea his wife wasn't tallying up the cost of keeping his mom alive, bought it. When Sarah pulled through that first round of treatment, I swear I saw a flicker of frustration in Victoria's eyes. She'd been banking on Sarah's illness opening up our savings, modest as they were. Soon after, the questions started creeping in. Had we redone our will? Was the house paid off yet? What about life insurance? She'd ask with this fake casual vibe, like she was just checking in on us. Sarah saw right through her game. One night, after another awkward family dinner where Victoria prodded us about our money, Sarah took my hand and pulled me into her little office. "I've got to make some changes," she said softly, grabbing a folder stuffed with legal papers. "I've been chewing on this for a while." I just nodded, getting it right away. "Thomas ain't gonna be happy," she said with a heavy sigh, looking older than her 71 years. "He ain't thinking straight, hasn't been for years. But one day he'll wake up. And when he does, we gotta make sure he's taken care of. That boy we raised is still in there, just buried deep right now. Over the next few months, Sarah had quiet meetings with our lawyer. She kept the details from me, only saying she was fixing things. When the cancer came back in 2023, meaner than before, she seemed almost okay with it. "Swear to me," she said one night, lying in her hospital bed, "swear you won't spill about the will changes till I'm gone. Victoria will just push Thomas to fight it." "Sarah, don't say that. You're gonna beat this again," I told her. But her smile said we both knew the truth. The treatment wasn't working this time. "Promise me, Bill." I gave her my word. And I held to it through those awful last months, through hospice, through the long, painful goodbye. I kept it when Victoria stopped showing up, saying it was too hard to see Sarah in a hospital bed. I kept it when Thomas came by alone, all awkward and guilty, barely able to look at me. I kept it at the funeral, even when Victoria's nasty words sliced through my sorrow. I held tight to that promise as we headed to the lawyer's office, where Sarah's final wishes were about to come out. Victoria sat across from me, looking annoyed and checking her watch like she had better places to be. "Hope this wraps up quick," she muttered to Thomas. "We gotta figure out what to do with that house. Market's prime right now." Thomas gave a half nod, but I caught a glint of unease in his eyes. Some tiny piece of the kind, thoughtful boy Sarah and I raised was still there, just smothered by years of Victoria's sway. The lawyer walked in, arms full of files, and Victoria sat up, putting on a fake somber face. Emily was next to me, her hands slipping into mine under the table. "Before we dive in," the lawyer said, "Mrs. Whittaker left clear instructions. There's a letter to read first." He handed me an envelope, my name scrawled in Sarah's familiar handwriting. "She wanted you to read it out loud, Mr. Whittaker." My hands shook as I tore it open, wondering what final words my wife had left and what kind of shock was about to hit. The paper looked worn, like she'd written and rewritten it to get it just right. I cleared my throat and started reading. "My dear family. If you're hearing this, I've moved on to whatever's next. Don't stay sad too long. We all knew this was coming, and I'm at peace with it. Before Mr. Donovan gets into the legal stuff, I want to explain why I made the choices I did. All my life, I've tried to do what's right, not what's easy. This last act ain't no different. Bill, my love, you gave me 48 incredible years. You were there through the wins and the losses, the healthy days and the sick ones. You kept me steady when everything felt like it was falling apart. Everything I am, everything I did, I owe to you standing by me. Thomas, my boy, it's broken my heart watching you slip away from the values your dad and I taught you. I ain't mad. We all get lost sometimes. I just hope one day you'll find your way back to who you are. Emily, my sweet girl, thank you for being so strong, especially when I was sick. Your dad's gonna need that strength moving forward. I made some choices in this will that might catch a few of you off guard. They weren't made out of anger or meanness, but with a clear head and a full heart. I built something in my life, and I wanted to do good after I'm gone. All my love." I tucked the letter away, my eyes stinging with tears that made everything blurry. The only sound in the quiet room was Victoria's finger drumming impatiently on the shiny conference table. Mr. Donovan, who'd been William's lawyer for more than a quarter century, coughed lightly and pushed his glasses up his nose. "Let's move on to the official reading of William Whittaker's last will and testament," he announced. Victoria sat up straighter, a little smirk tugging at her lips. She grabbed Thomas's hand, giving it a quick, eager squeeze. "To my beloved wife, Margaret Ellen Whittaker, I bequeath our house at 1423 Maple Street, fully paid off with no debts, plus a monthly payment of $3,500 for as long as she lives," Mr. Donovan read. I gave a small nod, not surprised. Our place wasn't fancy, but it held 48 years of our life together, every scratch and laugh etched into its walls. "To my daughter, Emily Rose Whittaker Larson, I leave $80,000 and my set of first edition books, which she's always loved," the lawyer continued. Emily let out a soft gasp next to me, Those books weren't just worth money, they carried memories she cherished. To my son, Thomas William Whitaker, Mr. Donovan went on, I leave $8,000. Victoria's head jerked up, her smirk wiped clean off. That's all, she snapped under her breath. Thomas just sat there, his face twisted in confusion, like he couldn't process it. Mr. Donovan raised a hand to signal he wasn't done. But I've also set up a $200,000 trust fund for my grandson, Benjamin Thomas Whitaker, strictly for his education and well-being. What's that supposed to mean, strictly? Victoria shot back, her voice sharp. It means, Mr. Donovan said, calm as ever, the money's locked for Benjamin's schooling, medical bills, or basic needs only, with Mrs. Whitaker and me as co-trustees. I could see Victoria's cheeks flush red. She'd been banking on a big payout she could call the shots on. Instead, William made sure our grandson was set, but in a way she couldn't touch. As for the rest of my estate, Mr. Donovan pressed on, including my investments, retirement funds, and life insurance payout, I'm leaving it to the William and Margaret Whitaker Foundation, created to fund research for kids' cancer treatment. Victoria jumped up, her chair scraping the floor. This is insane. There's got to be a mistake. She spun to Thomas. Say something. This can't be legal, can it? Thomas looked like he'd been sucker punched, his voice barely a mumble. Dad gave almost everything to a charity. Mr. Donovan nodded. Your father was crystal clear about his wishes. He and Mrs. Whitaker had talked for years about starting this foundation, ever since your sister Sarah died of leukemia. Sarah, our first kid, taken from us at 6 years old. The grief had softened over time, but it never left us. William and I used to talk about honoring her memory with something big, but I didn't know he'd actually made it happen. This is unbelievable, Victoria spat, her voice shaking. We'll fight this. Thomas is his son, he deserves more. Mrs. Whitaker, Mr. Donovan said, steady as a rock, I should warn you that William expected someone might challenge the will. He left detailed notes explaining every choice, including records of over $250,000 he'd already given Thomas over the years. Contesting this would make those records public. Thomas went pale. Those were the loans he'd begged for, cash for failed business ideas, the down payment on the house Victoria had to have, the fancy car she said they needed to look the part. William never asked for a dime back, but he'd kept track of every penny. He can't do this, Victoria whispered, but she sounded deflated, like the fight was draining out of her. It's not right. It's completely legal, Mr. Donovan said firmly. And if you want my advice, challenging it would be a bad move. Emily reached over and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. I squeezed back, thankful for her being there. I hadn't known William planned all this, but it didn't shock me. He always did what he thought was right, no matter how tough. The meeting wrapped up soon after, and Victoria stormed out without a word. Thomas hung back, looking like a lost kid. Mom, he said quietly, I didn't know about the foundation, or about Sarah. There's a lot you've missed, Thomas, I said, keeping my voice soft. Maybe it's time you start digging into what matters. He gave a slow nod, then shuffled out after his wife. As Emily and I grabbed our stuff, Mr. Donovan handed me a small envelope. One last thing, he said. William wanted you to have this privately. Inside was a single key and a note in his handwriting. When you're ready, Maggie. All my love, Jay. The next morning, I was in the kitchen, mechanically scooping coffee grounds, my head still spinning from the day before. I hadn't slept much, replaying Victoria's fury, Thomas's stunned face, and that mysterious key now sitting on the counter. What was William up to that he hadn't told me about? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of it. Emily's name lit up the screen. Mom, you seen what Victoria's saying online? My gut sank. No, what's she done now? She's on Facebook, claiming you and Dad tricked him into rewriting his will when he was too sick to think straight, Emily said, her voice tight with frustration. She's saying you both ganged up to screw Thomas over. I slumped into a kitchen chair, suddenly bone-tired. That's nonsense. Your dad was sharp as a tack until the end. I know, and you know, Emily said, but she's playing the victim card, tagging family and friends to stir up drama. I shut my eyes, a headache creeping in. Let her throw her tantrum. Folks who knew your dad won't buy it. But the mess was already spreading. My phone kept buzzing, texts and calls from cousins, old friends, some backing me up, others asking why William made those choices. A couple even hinted I should be fair and split the money with Thomas. The doorbell chimed, pulling me to the front door. Peeking through the peephole, I spotted Thomas on the porch, all alone, looking rough, scruffy beard, dark bags under his eyes. I paused for a second, then swung the door open. "Mom," he croaked, his voice raw, "can we talk?" I waved him inside, pointing toward the living room. He perched on the edge of the couch, looking out of place in the house he grew up in. "Victoria's pushing me to fight the will," he spilled, words tumbling out fast. "She's saying Dad's meds messed with his head, that we can prove someone was pulling his strings." "You mean me," I said, my tone flat as a pancake. Thomas at least had the grace to look embarrassed, his eyes dropping to the floor. "I didn't say that, Mom." "But yeah, she did." He raked a hand through his hair, a move so much like William it hit me like a punch to the chest. "She's pissed. We were banking on Dad's money to clear some debts." "What kind of debts are we talking about, Thomas?" I asked. He couldn't meet my eyes, staring off at the wall. "Victoria likes the finer things, and her business ideas haven't exactly panned out like she makes it sound." "So she married you thinking your dad's cash would bail her out?" I pressed. "That's not how it is, Mom," he said, but it sounded weak, like he didn't quite believe it himself. "Really? When's the last time she gave a damn about your dad, or me, or anyone in this family?" I asked, leaning forward. He didn't say a word, and that silence told me everything. "Your dad loved you, Thomas, but he wasn't clueless," I went on. "He saw how Victoria was pulling you away, always scheming to get her hands on more money. If Dad had a problem, he could have just talked to me," Thomas mumbled, barely convincing himself. "And would you have heard him out? Or would you have run straight to Victoria, who'd spin it like we were just being a pain in the ass?" I asked. His quiet confirmed what I'd already figured. "If you try to fight this will," I said, keeping my voice low, "you're gonna lose, and you'll torch whatever's left of us." "Is that what you're after?" "No," he whispered, barely audible. "But I'm stuck, Mom. Victoria's livid, she says I've got to pick between her and you." My heart cracked for my boy, caught in a marriage that was more about control than love. "That's not love, son," I said. "That's someone trying to own you." He shot to his feet, like he couldn't sit still anymore. "I gotta go. I needed to see you," he said, heading for the door. "Thomas," I called out as he reached for the knob. "Your dad left you something not written in that will." He turned, his brow furrowed. "What's that?" "A shot at remembering who you are, deep down," I said. He didn't respond, just slipped out the door. After he left, I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by pieces of William, his worn-out armchair, still shaped to his frame, the model trains he'd tinker with on weekends, the photo frames capturing our life together. I picked up that strange key again, rolling it between my fingers. What was my husband hiding from me to discover? That night, while I was flipping through a pile of condolence cards, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Victoria, dressed to the nines in a pricey suit, her face plastered with fake concern. "Margaret," she purred, voice dripping with honey, "I figured we should have a little heart-to-heart, just us girls." I nearly slammed the door, but curiosity won out, so I stepped aside to let her in. She strolled into the living room, her eyes scanning the place like she was pricing it out. "This house has so much charm," she said. "A few upgrades, and it could be worth a fortune." "It's not going anywhere," I shot back, my voice blunt. Her smile stayed put, but it never touched her eyes. "Of course, I didn't mean that," she said smoothly. "But let's be real, this place is a lot for one person, and keeping it up won't be cheap. I'll get by, I said, crossing my arms. She sat down without asking, crossing her legs like she was posing for a photo. Let's cut to the chase, she said. Thomas deserves his rightful piece of his dad's estate. William wasn't in his right mind when he rewrote that will. If you join us in challenging it, we could work out a deal that makes everyone happy. You mean a deal that makes you happy, I said, not budging. Her smile tightened, like a rubber band about to snap. This foundation's a sweet thought, but family comes first, right? She said. Thomas is William's only son. William knew exactly what he was doing, I fired back. And so do you, Victoria. You've never given a hoot about this family, just what you could squeeze out of us. For a split second, her mask slipped, showing the anger underneath. You've always had it out for me, she said, voice sharp. You've been turning Thomas against me since day one. No, Victoria, I said, calm but firm. You've managed that all on your own. She stood, brushing her skirt like she was dusting off the conversation. All right, do what you want, Victoria snapped. But mark my words, Thomas will pick me, like he always does, and you'll be left with nobody. After she stormed out, I sank into William's old armchair, her threat hanging heavy over me. Was she right? Would my son side with her again, like he'd done so many times? The idea of losing him for good twisted my heart like a wrung-out rag. That night, I had a dream about William. We were young, strolling along the sandy beach from our honeymoon, the waves crashing soft and steady. It's gonna be okay, Maggie, Dream William said, flashing that warm grin I'd always loved. I woke up with wet cheeks, but a strange calm settled over me. Whatever was coming, I'd face it with the grit William always knew I had. Come morning, my phone pinged with a text from Thomas. Victoria's pushing to move out of state. Says there's nothing left for us here. My stomach dropped like a stone. So that was her game, yank Thomas far away, cut me out of his life for good, finish the walls she'd been building around him for years. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, unsure what to say back. Then my gaze landed on that odd key William left me. It was time to figure out what had opened. In our bedroom closet, tucked behind William's row of suits, sat a small safe I'd barely noticed before. He'd stored important papers there, but I always left that stuff to him. With shaky hands, I slid the key into the lock. Inside, I found a manila envelope with Margaret scrawled across it. As I tore it open, I realized this was William's final gift, not just to me, but to Thomas too. It was proof. Proof that could turn everything upside down. Hands trembling, I spread the envelope's contents across the dining room table, the same table where we'd eaten family dinners, blown out birthday candles, and played Monopoly on stormy afternoons. Now it held the truth about Victoria's lies, bank records showing big chunks of cash pulled from Thomas's accounts, funneled into ones only she controlled, credit card bills packed with charges for fancy jewelry and clothes while she swore they were scraping by, screenshots of her private chats with friends, laughing at our family, calling William and me cash machines, bragging about how she'd hit the jackpot once William was gone. Worst of all was a letter from a divorce lawyer, dated 2 months back. Victoria had been plotting to ditch Thomas as soon as she thought his big inheritance was locked in. I slumped into a chair, my heart aching for my boy. How could I break this to him? Should I even try? William left me this evidence, but showing it might crush Thomas. Keeping it secret, though, could trap him in Victoria's web for years. Before I could make up my mind, the doorbell rang again. I scrambled to scoop the papers back into the envelope, then answered the door. It was Thomas, looking worse than ever, eyes red and puffy, clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, can I come in? I stepped back, spotting a small suitcase at his feet. What's going on? I asked. He shuffled into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, like his legs just gave out. Victoria and I got into it. Bad, he said. I sat next to him, giving him space to talk. She told me to cut you off completely, said it's her or you. When I didn't jump to agree, she let some things slip. What did she say, Thomas? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked up, tears brimming in his eyes. She said she never cared about Dad, that she was just biding her time till he died so we'd get the money. Said you and me were just rungs on her ladder to the life she's owed. I took a deep breath, careful not to let my anger show. And what did you do? I asked. I walked out, he said, nodding at the suitcase. Grabbed some stuff and left. Didn't know where else to go. My heart lifted, cautious but hopeful. This was the first time in years Thomas had picked me over her. But I knew Victoria wouldn't let go easy. You're welcome here as long as you need, I told him. He nodded, then his eyes caught the envelope I'd left on the coffee table. What's that? He asked. I froze. Was this the moment? Would it push him away again? But seeing my son, really seeing him, raw and hurting like I hadn't in years, I knew I had to trust him with the truth. Your dad left this for me, I said, sliding the envelope open. I think he meant for me to use it if things came to this. I handed him the papers without a word. I watched his face as he read, shock melting into disbelief, then anger, and finally a heavy, gut-wrenching sadness. How'd Dad get all this? He whispered, voice barely there. I don't know, I said. He never breathed a word about it to me. Thomas set the papers down slow, like they might bite. All these years, he said, his voice breaking apart, I stood up for her. I chose her over you and Dad. I bought it when she said you were trying to run my life, that you didn't want me happy. She was good at selling her story, I said softly, trying to ease the blow. That's no excuse, Mom, he said, shooting to his feet and pacing the room. I should have seen through her. I should have known what she was. Thomas, don't, I started, but he cut me off. No, Mom, I was blind. Stupid blind. And I hurt you and Dad because of it. I walked over, grabbing his hands in mine. They felt so much like William's, solid, steady, even now. Your dad never stopped loving you, I said. And neither did I. His shoulders sagged, like the weight of it all was too much. How can you just let this go so easy? Thomas asked, his voice thick with guilt. Because that's what moms do, I said, giving his hands a firm squeeze. And because I know the real you's still in there, the good kid your dad and I raised, full of heart and honesty. Victoria didn't wipe that out, she just kept it buried for a spell. Thomas pulled me into a hug, the first one in years, and for a minute, we just stood there, a mom and her boy, starting to mend what had been broken for so long. That night, after Thomas crashed in his old room, I settled into William's armchair, feeling him all around me like a warm blanket. You saw it coming, didn't you? I murmured to the quiet room. You knew she'd push him too far one day. The next morning, over steaming mugs of coffee, Thomas and I tackled the tough talk about what was next. He was dead set on divorcing Victoria but fretted about Benjamin. She'll try to use him against me, he said, his jaw tight. She's already warned me she'll block me from seeing him if I don't play ball. Before I could answer, my phone rang, Emily, cutting right to it. Mom, you checked Facebook yet? She asked. Victoria's dragging Thomas through the mud now, saying he ditched her and Benjamin, calling him unhinged and in need of help. I passed the news to Thomas, and his face turned to stone. That's enough, he said, grabbing his phone and typing like a man possessed. I'm done letting her spin this story. I watched my son, who'd been so quiet for so long, finally stand tall. I've kept my mouth shut too long, he said, reading as he typed. Out of respect for my dad's memory and my family, I've ignored the lies and attacks. But no more. The truth is, my marriage was built on Victoria's schemes, not love. My folks saw what I was too stubborn to admit. Dad, if you're out there, I get it now, what you tried to show me. Sorry it took me so damn long. He hit post and looked at me. It's just a start, but it's something. His phone lit up almost instantly, pings from friends rallying behind him, family offering support, and a flurry of enraged texts from Victoria. "She's threatening to take Benjamin and bolt out of state," Thomas said, his voice tight with panic. "Says I'll never see him again." I thought of the envelope, the bank records, the divorce lawyer letter, the messages laying bare Victoria's true colors. William had armed us with everything we needed. "She's not taking Benjamin anywhere," I said, a fire sparking in me. "Your dad made damn sure of that." Thomas's eyes flicked up, a glimmer of hope breaking through. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father was always 10 steps ahead," I replied, grabbing the envelope. "And he left us a playbook for handling Victoria." As I walked Thomas through the plan William had set up before he passed, a warmth spread through me. My husband was gone, but his love and foresight were still shielding us. He'd known this fight was coming and planned for it with that careful, steady way of his. For the first time since his diagnosis, I felt the load on my shoulders ease up. We had a rough road ahead, but we'd face it side by side, mother and son, with William's smarts leading the way. Victoria had misjudged us all, William's quiet planning, my stubborn strength, and Thomas, who was finally stepping out of her shadow. Her days of pulling strings were done. That night, as Thomas and I flipped through old photo albums, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Donovan, papers filed per William's orders. Custody hearing scheduled. Victoria's been served. Thomas and I shared a look, hopeful but wary. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, we were in it together. A year after William's funeral, in the spring of 2025, I stood in our backyard, watching Benjamin dart across the lawn after a butterfly. My grandson had turned 7 last month, and we'd thrown him a big party, our patched-up family all together again. Thomas was at the grill, flipping burgers just like William used to, while Emily set out a tray of sliced fruit nearby. The last 12 months had been a hell of a ride, but they'd changed us for the better. Victoria didn't go down easy. She fought the divorce tooth and nail, slinging lies about Thomas's mental state, playing the broke card, even trying to turn Benjamin against his dad. But William's evidence was a game changer, the bank statements showing her shady money moves, the divorce lawyer's letter, the messages bragging about her plan to dump Thomas after cashing in. It all laid out a woman who'd married for a payday, not love. The judge gave Thomas primary custody, with Victoria stuck with supervised visits until she got herself into counseling. She hightailed it to California with some new guy not long after, and her visits with Benjamin had petered out. "Mom," Thomas called from the grill, "burgers are about ready." I grinned, watching him flip one with the same flair William had passed down. My son had come so far this year, shaking off the doormat he'd become with Victoria. The real Thomas, kind, sharp, sure of himself, was back in full force. He'd settled into a little place 2 blocks over, close enough for Benjamin to swing by after school. Our bond had healed, slow and sometimes messy, as we worked through years of hurt and crossed wires, but we kept at it, just like William would have wanted. "Grandma, check this out," Benjamin shouted, holding up a caterpillar he'd found. "Can we keep it in a jar and see it turn into a butterfly?" "Sure thing, darlin'," I said with a grin. "Your grandpa would have been all over that idea. Back when your dad was a kid, he was always collecting jars full of critters, bugs, lizards, you name it." Benjamin flashed a big smile, his missing front tooth making him look even more like a little rascal. "My dad says Grandpa William was a walking encyclopedia about the outdoors," Benjamin piped up. "He sure knew his stuff," I nodded, a familiar pang hitting my chest at the mention of William's name. That sharp grief I used to feel had dulled over the years, now more like a quiet ache, the kind you get when an old scar acts up before a storm. After we ate lunch, the kids sprawled out on the patio, laughing over some board game, while Thomas pitched in to help me clear the table. We moved in easy silence, the clink of dishes filling the air until he broke the quiet. "Hey, Mom, I was rummaging through some old stuff in the garage yesterday and came across something." He fished a small, beat-up leather notebook from his pocket. "Pretty sure it's Dad's old journal." My heart did a little flip when I saw it. That notebook was William's constant companion in his final year, always tucked in his shirt pocket as he scribbled his thoughts. I'd figured it was gone for good. You take a look inside yet? I asked. Thomas shook his head. Didn't feel right to open it without you here, he said. We settled at the kitchen table, the notebook sitting between us like a sacred relic. My hands shook a bit as I flipped to the first page, dated right after William got his diagnosis in 2022. I'd been mulling over what legacy really means. William wrote in that slanted handwriting I'd know anywhere. It's not about cash or land, those are just things that fade. True legacy is the values we hand down, the wisdom we share, the love that keeps going long after we're dust. I read it out loud, my voice barely above a whisper. Thomas hung on every word, now and then brushing a tear from his cheek. Each page peeled back William's heart from those last months, his worries for Thomas, his pride in Emily, his deep love for me, and all the ways he tried to shield us for when he'd be gone. One entry near the end stopped me cold. Margaret says I'm being too tough with the will. She thinks Thomas will come around about Victoria on his own, no need for me to step in. She's probably right, she usually is about this stuff. But I can't risk it. I've seen the hurt in my boy's eyes, caught between his wife's greed and his love for us. I've got to carve a clear road back to his family, even if it means hard calls now. I trust the man Margaret and I raised is still in there, fighting to break free. And when he does, we'll be here, arms wide open, ready to bring him home. Thomas's shoulders trembled with quiet sobs. He saw it all, he murmured. He knew I was stuck, and he figured out how to pull me out. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Your dad always saw deeper than he let on. He never stopped believing in you, even when you doubted yourself. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the backyard where William and I had spent so many summer nights, I sat alone on the porch swing he'd built way back when. The journal lay in my lap, open to its final entry, written just 2 days before he passed in early 2024. My sweet Margaret, you'll find this when the time's right. You've been my everything, my heart, my soul, my every breath, for 48 years. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. But my love for you? That's forever, beyond this life. Leaving you is the hardest thing, knowing I won't see your smile, feel your hand in mine, or hear that laugh of yours. But I'm at peace, knowing I've done all I could to keep our family safe. Remember what I used to say about gardening? Sometimes you've got to cut away the sick branches so the good ones can grow strong. Victoria was the rod in our family tree. By the time you read this, that branch will be gone, and the healing will have started. Trust the process, my love. Trust Thomas. And above all, trust yourself, you're tougher than you know. Until we're together again. All my love, William. Tears rolled down my face as I shut the journal. The swing creaked softly, almost like William was right there, nudging it with his foot like he always did. Grandma? Benjamin's little voice snapped me out of it. He stood in the doorway, pajamas all rumpled, clutching his stuffed bear. Dad says I can sleep over. Is that cool with you? I wiped my eyes and gave him a warm smile. You bet it's cool. You can crash in the guest room, or, I paused, then went for it. How about Grandpa's study, on the pull-out couch? He always swore it was the coziest spot in the house for a nap. Benjamin's eyes got huge. For real? In Grandpa's special room? Yup. I reckon he'd love that, I said. After tucking him into the sofa bed, surrounded by William's old books and his model trains, I lingered in the doorway. My grandson's messy hair lay on the same pillow where William used to catch his afternoon snoozes. Life keeps turning, even through the hurt. Thomas stepped up beside me, watching his boy sleep. Thanks, Mom, he whispered, for everything. I leaned into him, soaking up the comfort of having him close. Your dad would be so darn proud of you, of all of us, sticking together like this. We eased the study door shut and headed back to the porch. The night was soft and warm, the sky glittering with stars. William used to live for nights like these. Do you think he had it all figured out, how things would play out? Thomas asked, staring up at the constellations his dad taught him to spot when he was a kid. I thought of the journal, of William's careful plans, of how he'd woven his last act of love from beyond the grave. You bet he did, I said, sure as anything. Your dad always knew what he was doing. Always. We sat there, quiet and content, as a calm settled over me. Losing William would always sting, but that pain had turned into something else, something beautiful, like a family made whole again, tied together by a love stronger than death itself. William's final gift wasn't just the will that shut down Victoria's venom. It was the roadmap he left us, guiding us back to each other when we needed it most. And for that, I'd be thankful forever.